Alright, let's get this NES turned on. Gotta say up front, I don't own this game. It's actually a pretty expensive game. Felix the Cat on the NES and on the Game Boy aren't super cheap, so yeah, we're playing this off an EverDrive, but on a real NES, and I thought we would do this on a CRT, on my Commodore monitor. Some of you guys have said you'd like to see this monitor more often, so here you go. Yeah, as you saw on the title screen there, it did say copyright 1992 Hudson Soft. And, when I did the review for the Game Boy version, I was a little bit confused as to who actually developed the game. And as far as I can tell, Hudson Soft didn't develop this one either. They just published it. But it goes without saying, it still looks and plays a lot like a Hudson Soft game. As I mentioned in the Game Boy game, this is a very fun, albeit maybe sort of easy. This is a great game for kids if you're getting kids into video games, into retro video games. Yeah, the game's a little bit easy, but it's very fun. You got lots of unique power-ups, lots of big colorful sprites. It's a good looking game, good catchy music, just good stuff all around. And having played the Game Boy version first, I actually kind of did this backwards because the NES version came out first in 1992. The Game Boy version came out a year later. But it's pretty obvious that it was the Game Boy version was developed to be pretty much a direct port of the NES version. All the sprites, all the power-ups, the music, even the level design is pretty much identical between the two. Obviously, the Game Boy version's a little bit cropped with a lower resolution, but as far as I can tell, for the most part, it's mostly the same levels. I've heard the NES version is longer. It has a lot more levels, almost maybe too much. People have said that the Game Boy version, being shorter, it's a better game. It doesn't overstay its welcome, if you will, as on the NES version. Apparently, there's a lot more levels. Now, I haven't gotten that far. I've gotten to, like, World 4 or maybe 5 on the NES version so far. The nice thing about my EverDrive, well, it is a base model EverDrive. I think it's called the N8, but it's like, I don't remember, it's like the X5 version, not the X7 version, something like that. So on the higher end EverDrive versions, you have like multiple save states per game. On mine, I have one save state per game, but you know what? One is better than none. So in this game, I can save at any spot that I want and then like continue later, which is great. I mean, to be able to do that on real hardware, it's like something that you would normally do on an emulator. I can do that here, and I will take advantage of that. At one point we will load. So if you see the game suddenly jump forward, that's what happened there. That wasn't done in editing. That was done right on the NES with my save state. I was playing this game the other night and got a little bit farther. I don't know if I really explained some of the gameplay mechanics in the Game Boy review, so I'll mention it here. But as you can see, you're constantly collecting these Felix heads, and you might think at first, oh, they're just for points, or maybe every so many you get a 1-up, which is kind of true. But you really do want to get as many of those as you can. Basically try to get them all, because that's how your power-up system works. So every 10 Felix heads that you collect, you'll get a heart, and the heart will power you up to the next stage. So like each type of world, like if it's a water world versus a flying world versus, in this one, just a platforming on land, they each have like 4 levels of power-ups, and you progress through those levels of power-ups by getting the hearts. And again, every 10 Felix heads gets you a heart. The tank that I'm in right now is the highest level for this type of world. And what happens when you're in the tank, or when you're in the highest power-up level, and you collect another 10 Felix heads, you still get a heart, but now the heart will give you a 1-up. So every 10 Felix heads that you get while you're fully powered up is an extra life. So you can really rank up the extra lives in this game by staying in your most powered up form, basically not getting hit, and collecting as many of the Felix heads as you can. Like I said, this game is pretty easy. I was ranking up, like, I think by the time I was on World, like, 4, you know, I had, like, 10 or 12 lives, because I just kept collecting them. And, yeah, like the Game Boy game, it's fairly easy. You'll probably just beat this game, like, the first time you play it. And on the Game Boy game, because, again, it's not very long, that might take you 20 minutes, maybe? 20, yeah, about 20 minutes, I think. You can basically just breeze through the whole game and beat it. So for the Game Boy, I guess because, like, you can't save or continue or anything on the Game Boy version. So, I mean, you pretty much got to beat it just in one go. So I guess that's why they shortened it. Yeah, so basically the NES version, again, supposedly is a lot longer, and some people think it's too long. So I don't know how long it would take you to beat the NES version. But again, typically, if you're not playing on an emulator or an EverDrive that has save states, you'd have to do it all in one, like, go. There's no password system in this game. So yeah, it's fairly easy, but it's very fun. This game is so much fun that I think anyone who's a fan of Felix, or just a fan of colorful platformers, a fan of NES games, probably gonna like this game. So it's definitely worth checking out. Unfortunately, like I said, it's not super common, and it's fairly expensive. I think a loose cartridge goes for about $100 Canadian, off the top of my head. I think the Game Boy version's similar, again, off the top of my head. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I'm pretty sure you're looking at about $100 for this game, and that's just for the loose cartridge. So it is a great game, and if I ever saw it, and it was priced, let's just say, improperly, like, even if someone wanted like $40 for it, I would definitely pick it up. But I'm probably not going to pay $100 for it. So yeah, at times like this, the EverDrive always comes in handy. And not only can I play a game like this, I can do the save states, like I said. Yeah, someone mentioned recently they wanted me to do more videos showing the Commodore monitor here. This is a CRT, obviously, and it's just running off composite for the NES. That's what the NES has. And yeah, I've always thought the Commodore made a great little TV. Back when I was in grade school in the early 90s, we still had Commodore 64s in our classroom. And, like, sometimes it's like the last day of the year or the last day before March break, and it's kind of like a party day. Like, maybe you'll have like pizza and people will bring in like games and stuff. Well, back in the early 90s, my classmates would bring in, their Game Boys or their Game Gears, and sometimes someone would bring in like an NES or a Sega Genesis. And because we had the Commodore 64 in the classroom, we eventually figured out, I don't know who, well, I guess it's right there on the front, it's not like a secret. Because, back then, if you were a kid and you saw the Commodore monitor hooked up to the computer, you wouldn't necessarily think, like, oh, it's just a TV. I can plug, an NES or a Sega Genesis into it. If you had a computer at home, like an IBM or an IBM compatible, and maybe it had like an EGA or a CGA or a VGA monitor, that's a monitor. It's not a TV. It typically won't have composite or S-video, any kind of inputs other than, it's D-sub connector that's meant to go to a computer. So, like, you wouldn't necessarily think, oh yeah, it's a computer monitor, but I can just plug an NES or a Sega Genesis into it. And when one of us, like, figured that out or did that, we were all like, oh wow, that's amazing. And it does look good. Like, it's very colorful. It's a classic 80s CRT, The contrast and the color is great. It's not quite PVM. Someone in one of my comments mentioned like it's close to PVM. They were just judging that off what they saw in my video, and it's not. Like, it's not PVM quality, but it's decent. It's decent by like 80s consumer television standards. And it's nice and small, and it's compact. It's got handles built in. It's got a decently loud speaker built in. What you're hearing in this video is actually just the speaker on the monitor. Sometimes I have it run through my little amp, and I got like speakers on the floor, but in this case, you're just hearing the speaker in the monitor, which is actually on top of the monitor. And I have a DVD player, a Pioneer DVD player, sitting on top of the monitor, and then the NES is sitting on top of that. So like the speaker, if anything's kind of blocked, but it doesn't really seem to matter. It's a very large and loud speaker for what it is. For a little, 14-inch CRT, it's actually got a pretty decent speaker in it. So again, it's compact. It's got the handles in it. It's a great CRT. I like to have the CRT around, but I understand like a lot of people, they don't have the room for like a CRT, especially like a 27, or like maybe they would have had in the late 90s. This is great just because it's so small, and yeah, it's not quite it's definitely not PVM quality, but it's realistically it's only composite input. Technically it has S-video, but you would need to make like a custom cable to use S-video, and again, for stuff like the NES or the Sega Master System, the best you're doing is going to be composite anyways. If you hooked up Super Nintendo or Sega Genesis to this with S-video, it's going to look a little bit better, but again, it's not quite PVM quality. The shadow mask isn't like the highest pitch, I guess, and it kind of semi interrupts the scan lines. Like, it doesn't have super clean scan lines like a PVM's gonna have. But again, like, contrast and color is still really good, and for the most part, like, if you had this in the early 90s or even mid to late 80s, this would have been amazing. It would have been an amazing little TV to play games on. One last thing I just wanted to show. I thought this was funny as I was playing on this NES controller, and my camera's in autofocus. Well, my camera was in fixed focus on the screen. I gotta kick it out of locked focus. There we go. $1.99. I paid $1.99 for this controller in a thrift store, and it's like, it says as is, but it's actually a perfectly good working NES controller, which is one of those things where it's like you probably won't find that today. Anyways, that's it, guys. See you later.